What is going on, hockey fans, and welcome back to your source for fantasy hockey news on the Monday episode of the Locked On Fantasy Hockey Podcast. We are recapping games 3 and 4, Vegas on the cusp, Florida on the brink, and what do you do with Chandler Stephenson next year? We're breaking it all down on Monday's episode. Let's get right to it.
You're Locked On Fantasy Hockey, your daily podcast on fantasy hockey. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Welcome back inside the lab, everybody. I hope you had a great weekend, and I hope you enjoyed games 3 and 4 of the Stanley Cup Final between the Golden Knights and Florida Panthers. We're going to break both those games down on today's episode, including a few very key takeaways that Steele and I have been noticing from these games. Matthew Tkachuk is obviously injured. We'll talk about that. Chandler Stephenson goes off in game 4, 2 big goals. What are you going to do with him next fantasy draft season? We'll break that down as well. And what's going on in Columbus, Steele? Damon Severson, the sign and trade, a lot of money and term going at a guy that we'll talk about what his fantasy value is. Maybe on the uptick now in Columbus. Welcome back from the weekend, my friend. You were at another UFC over the weekend. I had another big wedding. You and I are a little thirsty, a little hot, dehydrated. How are you doing? What were you seeing from the hockey over the weekend?
Yeah, incredible weekend. Games 3 and 4 for the Florida Panthers and Vegas Golden Knights, Stanley Cup Finals. What else can you expect? Just great hockey in general. And the guys that I said that needed to step up for the Florida Panthers did so in Game 3. Montour gets a goal. Ekblad and Forsling get an assist to tie it and the game-winning assist as well. So those three guys on the blue line stepped up in Game 3, but Florida did get pretty lucky to win Game 3 and get a win so far. They went 0 for 5 on the power play in the game. They're now 0 for 13 in the Stanley Cup Finals. Haven't had a single power play goal yet. They got outshot 27-23, out-hit 18-14, out-blocked 31-17. They were out everything in every statistical category you could think of. Had 24 turnovers to the Vegas Golden Knights, 7 turnovers in Game 3. Still found a way to win that game, but again, you talk about Matthew Tkachuk and the injury. Keegan Colasar demolished him to start Game 3.
Huge hit.
He looked a little wobbly there. He goes down the tunnel, down into the dressing room, gets a little work done, concussion protocol and everything. But I think him returning to the lineup, even not being 100% healthy or returning back to the bench, gets the crowd into the game more, gets the team into the game more. And that's really the stepping stone for them winning Game 3. They did get a little bit lucky to win that one with Tkachuk on the doorstep, tying it up in the final minutes of Game 3, but they got the win. And what did you see from Game 3? That's what I saw. I thought they got pretty lucky.
Yeah, Game 3. And this is what I've been seeing overall, Steele. Some of these scores haven't been really indicative of where the games have really gone or really kind of gone on. And we mentioned that, I think, a little bit about Game 1. Maybe it was a little closer than that 5-2 result kind of showed. And I think the same. Like, that could have gone very differently, I think, in Game 3. Game 4, a close one again, but this Tkachuk injury that you alluded to, obviously he is such an important piece for this Panthers team, not just on the ice, but off the ice as well. And we've talked about the swagger and we've talked about the energy, but you also made a really good point of them not capitalizing on the power play. We know how important special teams are at this point in the season and throughout the playoffs. And look, their run has been special. There's no taking away a single thing from what this team has done. And now with Paul Maurice behind that bench and this team having confidence, they're a force to be reckoned with in that Atlantic division now moving forward. And maybe that's the most important piece. But for me, one of my takeaways, and maybe not so much, well, actually in both, the third line's inability to be effective. Lundberg having to fill in for Luosterainen. John Madish of The Score made a really good point that there's never really a third line guy that really tips the whole series. But the pressure that's been put on the top six because of the inability of the bottom six of the Panthers to be any kind of effective offensively, Steele, I think is what really might do in this team in the end.
And it's the depth from the Vegas Golden Knights. The Florida Panthers just don't have that depth like you're talking about. Couldn't agree more with that. The depth, the bottom six group, especially the fourth line of the Vegas Golden Knights are, I would say, the identity line in the Western Conference. They get the team going. They get the fans and the crowd into the game, and they get the jump right off the start. So the depth has been a very big problem for the Florida Panthers. I want to, for the game 3, actually, Sergei Bobrovsky was also just phenomenal. They don't win that game without Sergei Bobrovsky's incredible 100%. Play. But yeah, I'm there with you in the same. Game 4 was, again, more of the same of what we've seen so far this Stanley Cup Finals. There was only 2 power plays in the entire game, but Florida had 28 penalty minutes because they just like to ensue chaos at the end of games, at the end of whistles and everything. And again, it was more of the same in game 4. They got out hit, they got out blocked, they tied in shots, they had more turnovers than Vegas. And I did say that William Karlsson would be a hero at some point in this series. He wasn't noticeable in games 1 through 3, but he gets the game-winning goal in game 4.
Right.
And so he steps up in a big way, but he wasn't the only hero. Adin Hill was just phenomenal. Makes an incredible last effort save. Robs Tkachuk, robs Bennett in the dying seconds. And, we were talking about the Conn Smythe. We've been talking about Conn Smythe the last week.
Yes,
13 games this playoff so far, a .934 save percentage, a
so
2.11 goals against average. There's a really good chance he wins the Conn Smythe. And I know Marchessault's up there. Eichel's up there. If Mark Stone can have a big game 5, or if it goes game 6, he could potentially win it. But Adin Hill and Jonathan Marchessault are the top 2 guys right now. I want it to be Jack Eichel because he's played so great too. But Adin Hill and Marchessault have really just stepped up their game.
Marchessault currently paying -600 over at our friends at FanDuel Sportsbook.
Wow.
Shout out to FanDuel. Adin Hill at +1,000 is about to get another $10 from me for fun, because that's worth it, Steele. Let's just, me with the numbers.
Oh, yeah.
$10. Actually, you know what? I got 15 here in the account. $15 pays 150. That's done. And anyway, Adin Hill has been solid, but I just want to bring up very quickly, before we get to break, we're going to talk a little bit about Chandler Stephenson, his beast mode game 4, and what to do with his fantasy value, because that's an interesting conversation to have. Where would you draft him? And we'll get to the Columbus Blue Jackets and the Severson sign and trade. But very quickly, Steele, Mark Stone was my X factor headed into this series.
Yeah.
And maybe he doesn't have all the point production to show how good he's actually been. He's starting to get there. The postseason, 21 points through 21 games. This guy is the prototypical hockey player when I draw him up. I'm not even just talking about fantasy right now, because he does bring a lot of value. His injury factor is another thing for fantasy. But just talking about if I was a coach drawing up a player, Steele, this is the guy. His giveaway takeaway ratio, he's one of the best every single year. He takes away the puck. He's solid in the neutral zone. He's solid when you need him in the clutch, and I just love his game. And he was so good in game 4, right along with Chandler Stephenson, teeing him up for that one-timer. Let's tee up that conversation about Chandler Stephenson right after the break. Today's episode is brought to you by AG1 and Athletic Greens. Steele and I love this stuff. 1 scoop in your smoothie in water every day. You get 75 high-quality vitamins and minerals, whole food source superfoods, probiotics, and adaptogens help you start your day right. I don't even really know what those are, but they're good for you because AG1 is always looking out for your health. And when you take one of those every single day, it's lifestyle friendly, whether you eat keto, paleo, vegan, dairy-free, or gluten-free, and it contains less than 1 gram of sugar, no GMOs, no nasty chemicals, no artificial anything, and it still tastes good. Helps support your gut health, helps you sleep better, helps you recover from injuries, helps you age with grace. Right now, it's time to reclaim your health and arm your immune system with convenient daily nutrition. Just 1 scoop in water every single day. That's it. No need for a million different pills and supplements to look out for your health. Steele hates those pills and supplements. To make it easy, Athletic Greens is going to give you 1 free year supply of immune-supporting vitamin D and 5 free travel packs with your first purchase. All you got to do is visit athleticgreens.com/NHL Network. That's athleticgreens.com/NHL Network to take ownership of your health and pick up the ultimate daily nutritional insurance.
And thank you so much for making the Locked On Fantasy Hockey Podcast your first listen every single day. We are a part of the Locked On Podcast Network, where you can find your favorite team from all 4 major sports leagues and the NCAA, your team every single day. More coverage this week of the Stanley Cup Finals. Game 5 back in Vegas at T-Mobile Arena on Tuesday, June 13th. And, of course, we also have Locked On Rangers host joining us later this week on Wednesday. John Chick joining us for Wednesday's episode of Locked On Rangers. We're going to try to have a Locked On host every single week throughout the offseason. So we can get through all 32 teams in the NHL. Can't wait to break them down and what their future fantasy is like for next season. But Chandler Stephenson from the Vegas Golden Knights, his fantasy value for next season as well.
Yeah.
Unbelievable what he's actually doing right now. And, we've talked about him quite frequently, I feel like, on this podcast.
A little bit, yeah.
He's blossomed into such a well-rounded player and a well-rounded top six forward as well. I was looking at his average draft position over the last few years. Last year, his average, his ADP was 175.3, which I think is pretty accurate for a guy like that. So he was drafted in the 14th round. And looking at the fantasy leagues that we've been a part of, or that the 3 or 4 that I've been a part of this year, he went in the 14th or 15th round. Actually, in our fantasy league, he went in the 19th round. So he dropped quite a bit in our league, which was a little bit surprising. But just to compare him to a few other players with similar ADP, Boone Jenner, Nico Hischier, Brock Nelson, Carter Verhaeghe, just a few comparisons of where those guys are falling right now this last season. A few of them are obviously going to go up too, but Flip, after the season he had, 69 points in 81 games in the regular season, 10 goals, 19 points so far in the playoffs. I think he's bumping up at least 2 or 3 rounds, at least.
Yeah, I think so. I know he got a lot of really good opportunity because of all the injuries up front for Vegas this year. So maybe, and he's earned more playing time. So I don't think he's going to get a decrease in playing time, but obviously that factored in a little bit this year to his value. I think you're right. I'm spot on with you. He's just like with the small sample size that I thought he had. Maybe we're just seeing a flash in the pan, but actually, if you look back at over, his last 150 to 200 games, he's been really solid. He's almost at a point per game production rate. 16 goals, 49 assists. He chips in a little bit with the peripherals, 56 blocks, 74 hits, little bit of penalty minute action.
Yep.
It's his skill and his speed that impressed me, Steele. Excuse me. And I think that's really what's created some of these chances for him is his ability through the neutral zone to be a very responsible and effective player, and his entries. That goal where he, back to Stone for the tee up, his speed creates. He's also just really started to earn his respect. So when you kind of start quiet and you come on strong, this is a late 3rd round pick, I believe. Where was he taken? 77th overall. So 3rd round, mid-3rd round, start of the 3rd round, I guess. So he's really earning his keep, and I don't know what he's getting paid. Let me pull that up quickly too.
He's going to be making some money next year. I'll tell you that.
Right? This is what I'm saying. And we've talked at length about what Aiden Hill is doing for his value. But I think Chandler
Stephenson's at like 2.75.
He's right here. 2.7. Good for you, man. And he is, though. Oh, look at that. Unrestricted free agent coming up at the end of next season. So timely performances from Chandler Stephenson. Do I think you should draft him too high? Absolutely not. Be wary of that. But if you can snag him at the right round, like Steele's mentioning, he's the kind of player that's a real nice kind of peripheral piece for your team.
Yeah, very, very good fantasy play for your team. And you said it yourself, the peripheral numbers might not be there. They have improved over the years, but 120 shots this year is not great. 50 hits or 50 blocks. Like the peripheral stats aren't there, but he brings so much value fantasy-wise. And, consistently throughout his career, he was before this last year or the last 2 seasons, he was only averaging 20 points a year. And now he's put up 60 plus points the past 2 seasons. So it's not a fluke. It seems like this is the guy that, again, he's blossomed into this really good top 6 forward now. He's got triple eligibility, center, left wing, and right wing.
Which is huge.
Which is absolutely huge. He gets
that might be my favorite part about him, to be honest.
I love that. The triple eligibility or the dual eligibility. It's phenomenal. And, he gets a decent. He had 5 game-winning goals this season. He's on the second power play unit. He's on the shorthanded unit as well. So he's a dual threat on special teams.
Yep.
This last year, his ADP was the 14th round. He was getting drafted in the 14th round. And from what I've seen, I would not be surprised if he went as high as the 7th. I would feel comfortable. For me personally, I would feel comfortable drafting him in the 9th or the 10th, but I wouldn't be surprised if he went as high as the 7th, because looking again, you go back to the draft recap, there's a few guys who just like didn't pan out. So there's always a few guys in those rounds who just like, I think Tanner Jeannot was taken in the 7th round, and that just did not work for anybody.
There you go.
Who took him.
Yeah.
So
well,
there's a couple of guys in each round that just don't pan out. And again, Chandler Stephenson, I think he could go as high as the 7th, but I would feel comfortable in the 10th.
Hindsight is always 2020, my friend, especially when we're talking about fantasy drafts.
Exactly.
You're talking to a fantasy GM over here who took Sorokin in the 2nd round and finished in last place. So big bounce back here coming from me. That was 1 out of 4 leagues for me. So we'll get there. Also, Chandler Stephenson is in the mix in the top 6 with some really good forwards in Vegas. Yeah. I'm intrigued to see what they do. Ivan Barbashev is an unrestricted free agent. They're going to have some moves to make, and maybe they bring in another good winger after they've seen how solid Chandler Stephenson can be in that second-line center role to play with him. They already have some good wingers in the mix, Riley Smith as well. I think, Steele, you got to keep an eye on where you take him realistically, like you alluded to, but he's a nice little supplementary piece for your squad, especially after how he's performed this postseason, especially in Game 4. Let's talk about CBJ and Severson right after the break.
Yeah, already a couple of additions to their team this offseason as well. Provorov, they do a sign-in trade with New Jersey for Damon Severson as well. Getting loaded on the blue line for the Columbus Blue Jackets. We will be talking about that next, but this episode is also brought to you by eBay Motors. For a championship team, it's all about making sure every player is the perfect fit. It's same when it comes to your vehicle. Every part needs to fit just right. So the next time you need parts and accessories, head to eBay Motors. With eBay Guaranteed Fit, you can be sure every part you need fits just right the first time around. Just add your ride to My Garage and look for the green check to know the part will fit, or you get your money back. Because just like in sports, confidence is the name of the game. And when you shop on eBay Motors, with over 122 million parts to choose from, you'll be back in the game in no time. After all, it's easy to bring home a win when the right parts are guaranteed. Get the right parts, the right fit, and the right prices on ebaymotors.com. eBay Guaranteed Fit only, available to U.S. customers, eligible items only, exclusions apply. eBay Motors, let's ride. And thank you so much for making the Locked On Fantasy Hockey Podcast your first listen every single day. We appreciate all the love and support you show us. Remember to hit the subscribe button, hit the follow button, leave us a review, some comments, DM us on Twitter at LO_FantasyNHL. We appreciate all the connections and conversations we have with our listeners out there, people that want to join the Fantasy League for next year. Again, we're going to be releasing all those details this offseason. But offseason that has started a little earlier for you teams, obviously the Philadelphia Flyers last week, and as well the Columbus Blue Jackets. But Columbus doing another trade, a sign-in trade now with the Devils for Damon Severson. And yeah, this is just like, how do you feel about this? Because at first I was kind of shocked at the contract length and number. But after, looking back, reading into their salary cap, their daily face-off line combinations, and what they've got for the future, I'm kind of leaning to being a little bit impressed with what's going on right now.
Well, they're improved, right?
Yes.
They're better than they were a week ago. That's 100%. Maybe did they have to overpay to do it? Probably.
I think so. Yes.
Especially in this Severson case, which is he a very serviceable defenseman? For sure. Does he now get a bump in fantasy value? I want to say yes. You might go flip. He's going from a amazing offensive team to a team that really struggles. He could be -4 every single night. True. Yeah. But he's also going to get a lot more minutes, and he's going to probably get a chance to run that top power play and play alongside Rowensky. He's also going to get a good chance to feed the biscuit to Goudreau, Line, and Boone Jenner up front on that top power play. So I can't help but feel that, do I know what's going on with the direction of the Columbus Blue Jackets? No. Do I think this is going to really lead them to more success in the standings? Maybe a bit. But I think the fantasy angle is what I'm most intrigued with here, Steele. And just before I throw it back to you very quickly, Severson coming off a 33-point season. This is a player that was a part of some really bad Devils teams in his career, but is a career -120 across his 9 seasons in the NHL. So buyer beware. but he has had a 46-point season, a 40-point season. He's a 30-plus point capable defenseman, and now he might be a sneaky little late draft ad steal for some offensive boost from your blue line.
Yeah, I completely agree. And again, just looking at what Jarmo Kekalainen, the GM of the Columbus Blue Jackets, has done so far, not just this year, but over the last few seasons as well. Like, you look up front, he's got his goal scorer in Patrick Laine. He's got his facilitator and passer in Johnny Gaudreau. He's got some great young pieces on the blue line. You look at their blue line: Severson, Provorov, Peak, Bokvist, Werenski, Bean, a few more. They're all under the age of 28. Severson is the highest age. Well, I know there's Goodbranson, he's 31, but Severson is 28, and everyone else is under that. They've got some great young players on the blue line. Again, I think I would have liked to. Again, the contract is what's really setting me off here. I think it's just way too much money, because I think the one problem that they really needed to address, and I've been seeing it all over Twitter with a few buddies of ours, is their depth in the center position. They don't have great centermen right now, and Boone Jenner is not a number one centerman in the league. I think he would be a great fit on the second line. He is a top six forward, but he's a second line center. So you look at Columbus this year; they're drafting third overall. They've got the young gun over there, Leo Carlson, which could be an option for them at center as well, to fill in right away in the top six, or maybe start him on the third line and get some improvement. But again, I think they're heading in the right direction. You know, even with their coaching change. Like, say what you want about Mike Babcock, but he's a hell of a coach. Knows how to win. He has a .608 winning percentage over 16 years in the NHL. He's been to conference finals. He's won Stanley Cup. He's won the Stanley Cup once. Again, that was those were over a decade ago now, but
he's a good coach.
Like, he's a really good coach. So say what you want about what happened in Toronto, but he knows his hockey.
And you're mentioning, you know, the young pieces, Roslovic, Sillinger, even this Kirill Marchenko kid showed little flashes last year.
Well,
Kent Johnson. So this is one of those scenarios, Steele, that I think, because the bar has been set so low by this team over the last couple of years, especially the last two, I would say.
Yeah.
With these pieces, and those are two veteran blue liners, by the way. Provorov might be on the younger side with his best years ahead of him too, but these are guys with multiple years in the NHL, especially Severson. And I don't know what's really gonna, you know, Merzlikins showed some signs of being able to be a goalie. Tarasov is an interesting. I'm just saying, if a lot of things go right for Columbus, and that's a big if, they're going to surprise some teams next year, because the bar has been lowered so much. And also, Gaudreau down year. Laine injured again.
Yeah.
A lot of ifs, right? If Laine stays healthy, if could surprise some teams.
And that was the big thing of why this past year was so disappointing, is they were, I think they were top 3 for most games missed. Lost. Like, they had so many injuries this year that's why they were at the bottom of the Metropolitan and bottom of the NHL. They had so many injuries. So again, if they can stay healthy, if Patrick Laine can play more than 70, 75 games. Like, he hasn't played a full season, I don't think, since his rookie year. Probably. But yeah, so like, they had a ton of injuries. Werenski was out pretty much from the get-go. Goalies interchangeable. Laine was, ankle injury, elbow injury.
Jenner was hurt too.
Yeah, very fluky injury. So if they're healthy, this team with Mike Babcock at the helm and all their superstar players, especially Werenski, they need Werenski to stay healthy. They cannot lose. They cannot afford to lose him, even with the addition of Provorov and Severson. They could fight for a playoff spot. Maybe, you never know what could happen with how the team's looking.
Yep. Yeah. It's like I said, it's going to have to be a lot of different things going right, just because of also how good the East has stacked itself up to be over the last 2 seasons. Maybe perhaps the Metro most impressively. Yeah, it's just, these are the angles, Steele, that you got to stay on top of now. Before then, because what happened last year, when you start to see the line rushes and combinations, and some of these players that you didn't have your eye on are playing on a top line, getting top power play minutes, and you miss out on them. Do your research, tune into the show all summer. We'll be here. We're going to be breaking down every single team. We're going to have rosters, positional breakdowns. Steele and I are going to have all the draft prep you need ready, just in case you're in one of those leagues who drafts real early at the end of the summer. make sure you stay tapped in right here to the Locked On Fantasy Hockey Podcast.
All the fantasy value on the Locked On Fantasy Hockey Podcast. You never want to miss out what your boy Flip is saying, and your boy Steele over here as well.
Bang.
And thank you so much for making the Locked On Fantasy Hockey Podcast your first listen every single day. Make sure you're tuning in Monday through Friday, 7 o'clock in the morning. Remember, we've got special guest John Chick coming up for Wednesday's episode, Game 5 preview. Maybe Game 6 if Florida can win another one, but you never know. It's the Stanley Cup Finals. Vegas 1 win away from winning their first Stanley Cup in their history. Thank you so much for joining us for today's episode with Flip and I. Have a great day. Good luck with all your bets out there, if you have any, and we shall see you back here again tomorrow.
Peace.